Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 5 of Serve Like Jesus. And I think you can tell, we'll just say this right out of the gate, that we are not on Zoom and we have made it professional. Emily, why don't you tell us where we are? Because we are in a real studio.
Yeah, so we graciously are able to use, my family has a marketing agency and they do a lot of podcasts and personal podcasts. So they allowed us to use it for this episode and any other ones in the future that we might need. So we are here and we are very thankful.
So we are pretending to be official today. It won't perhaps always be like this, but we are very thankful that your family is allowing us to use this space and for this very special episode. Again, if you haven't been watching us so far, go back, watch the first several episodes. There's been some fantastic conversations and interviews with special guests. And today we have another special guest with us, not just my colleagues, Emily and Kendall, but Edoxia, who is one of our leaders from the Middle East. And so that's going to be our focus in this episode, is highlighting what God is doing in that part of the world, which is very timely at the time of recording this in light of all the events that are unfolding in the Middle East. But I'm sure you're hearing all kinds of things on the news that would be of more negative connotations and just all the war dynamics and the fear of all of that. But we really want to bring light to what God is doing in that part of the world, because he is at work in some of the most remarkable, if not historic ways, that I'm super excited to be able to talk about and share a little bit more with you, especially with Edoxia here with us. So we'll try to dive into this and get started as quick as we can, but we will begin as we usually begin, with asking each other, checking in with each other, what is God speaking to you?
I'll go first. So in the last episode I was on, 2 episodes ago, the last one I had issues due to travel and I couldn't make it. I was super sad, but great things from the Ukrainian ladies. So I'm here and ready. But I think just transitioning from last time and knowing that God is good, even in seasons of unknown, is now waiting for that clarity. We just don't sit around and wait. God still gives us direction, and we have to trust him in that and pray for discernment to know what direction comes from him. And I think I'm just walking through that now, and it's an interesting journey, just seeing how from the first podcast episode, God is walking me through this season and it all connects, and it's just so cool. And I know that good, big things are coming and that clarity is coming. And I'm just rejoicing in that because I know God always works for our good. So that's what I'm currently walking through, and just trusting God with every step and waiting to know what is next.
Well, the question is, what is God speaking to you? And the reality is, right now, with everything going on this week, we had our Serve Now banquet last night, which was great, really went well, but had a lot of work we had to do related to that, sound and video and all that stuff, organizing people coming, hosting Edoxia here, lots of meetings and stuff. Frankly, I haven't had a lot of time to just stop and listen to God. I'm looking forward to, I try to take my Sabbath on Saturdays, and you guys are heading out of the area, so I might even be able to have a little time to listen here soon. But candidly, the biggest thing that I'm grateful for is knowing that God is with me in the busy times and the quieter times. So right now is a busy time. So I haven't had a lot of time to listen. So God is present, but I'm looking forward to listening a little closer to what exactly he has to say for me in this season.
Well, thank you both. That's both of you very honest about where you're at and, levels of uncertainty, which we all face in our journey. We don't always know everything or have everything figured out. And then there are just seasons of life where we are super busy and on the go, and it's hard to find that time to just be still, in at least the context of the way we usually think of it, of getting alone or getting away and just having that quiet time with the Lord. But actually, I was thinking of a place where Jesus says uh, that where I am, there my servant will be also. I don't remember the exact reference. I think it's in the Gospel of John. Where I am, there my servant will be. And I think sometimes, maybe because of the bad rap that Martha gets when she's in that season of being stressed out and upset with her sister about not helping as she's serving, and she's just sitting there at the feet of Jesus, and Jesus will go on to say, Martha, she's actually chosen what's better, to just sit and be still. And we think that that's always the better choice, but it's not that we just sit at the feet of Jesus. There are seasons to serve. And yet that doesn't mean we can't hear from him or that we're not following him. Or I think there's a way in serving that we can actually know the presence of God because we're with him where he is. Where is Jesus? He's serving. He's out with people, right? He's in the middle of the mess and the activity. So we can be serving him and aware of his presence, maybe in a unique way in the context of serving, even when we might not be able to have the quiet time that we normally have. But I know some of my most meaningful moments in my walk and relationship with God has, yes, there's been quiet times and devotional times where you hear his voice perhaps in a different way, but it's been in the middle of serving that have been some of the most meaningful moments in his presence and seeing what he's doing and being with him where he is. So for what it's worth, I think God can work in whatever season we're in, and it doesn't always have to look a certain way.
Yeah, I can affirm that as well. That I think usually for me, it's in reflecting on obedience and doing what God has called me to do. And then when I have time to look back on that, and I'm like, okay, I saw what you were doing there, God. But sometimes in the middle of it,
don't see it.
It's not always very clear.
Sure. Yeah,
it's one of those things too. You always hear people say God is working when you can't see. If you're so busy and don't have that time to see, but still know that he's there working, I think it gives you a point of view to look back at it afterwards and be intentional to realize, like, I see what God was doing. So yeah, I think you're right, Kendall. It's really powerful to know that no matter what season, God's always there.
Edoxia, would you like to share anything?
Well, I just want to say that I'm also in that season of life where I just feel like you do a lot, you're working, you're serving, and sometimes you don't have any clarity. You just feel like, okay, God, I don't know what's coming next here. And even though we're praying and seeking God, as you mentioned already, you just feel like he's quiet sometimes. And for me, it have been that we have to be consistent. And that's where I am, and just stuck there with God and just ask him, and God, can you just help me to be here and trust you, even if I don't hear you or see you sometimes. I just know that you are great and you know best, and I'm just gonna be here and do what I know until until you speak. Yeah, I'd say.
Yeah, awesome.
Just a thought related to that. I know that earlier this week you got to see the show Joshua. And one of the things I think about as you describe that sense of where you're at, I think about Joshua and Caleb 40 years walking around in the desert. And it wasn't because they didn't have faith, and yet God was with them and God sustained them through that time. And they still consistently were able to experience God's faithfulness to them.
That's true.
The manna, the tabernacle, they were still able to experience God, but God still had more for them. Those had to be some tough years.
I mean, sometimes I feel like I've been there, 40 years of just walking around and just, God, what's going on?
Hey, we're barely 40 years old.
Yeah, that's true. But I use it, Kendall, that you see the hand of God all the time, even though you feel like you are in the desert.
Yeah.
But you just see that. You see him taking care of you, even though you feel like you're lost. Yeah.
And Kendall's referencing a show from Sight and Sound that Emily, Kendall, and I live close by Sight and Sound. So people come from all over the world to watch these biblical production shows. Edoxia got to go watch one of those shows that is being performed right now on Joshua. All right. Well, for me, we're recording this almost 2 weeks after Easter. And what I've been thinking about is the fact not just that Jesus has risen from the dead, but he is risen from the dead. And that is an important distinction, because the resurrection of Jesus is not just a one-time historic event that we celebrate once a year and then go on with our lives as ordinary. And yet I think we often do that. It's like the resurrection is the pinnacle of the Easter season, and then that's it. But what I've really been reflecting on is what Jesus was doing after the resurrection. And what was he doing? Well, Acts chapter 1, verse 3 says that after his suffering and resurrection, he appeared to his disciples many times, giving them many convincing proofs that he was alive. And this was happening over a period of 40 days before he would ascend back to heaven. And then 10 days later would be what we now call Pentecost, which would be the coming of the Holy Spirit. But these 40 days were actually very critical in that Jesus was bringing a level of, he was helping his disciples navigate a season of intense confusion and trauma that they had just experienced. And he was bringing a level of clarity, and we kind of are touching on these themes of these seasons of uncertainty in our lives, but he was bringing clarity really to prepare them, to propel them to be his witnesses in the world in the days, the weeks, the months to come. And that would be to do what we're still doing 2,000 years later, which is to go into all the world and make disciples of all nations. He was preparing them for that. His resurrection was meant to propel them into global ministry. And that reality that he is alive is meant to do the same thing in our lives. And I think we often forget that the resurrection of Jesus has radical ramifications for our lives and is meant to propel us into global mission. And what a privilege that we get to be a part of that and have those that are partnering with us operating in that same spirit that raised Jesus from the dead now lives inside of us.
Yeah.
That's really good.
Yeah. Well, and I just think about the grace that Jesus demonstrated to his disciples during those times where not everyone was like, oh, yeah, you're alive. This is great. It was like, I think about Thomas, and he was struggling during that time, and Jesus was so gracious to him and patient. So,
This was a period of 40 days, going back to the whole 40-year thing. It took time. But that's the point, is that he's patient with us. He's gracious towards us. These guys were a mess. They had all just failed him. They all thought it was over. And Jesus appears alive to them, and that would radically, eventually, transform their lives. Yeah, good stuff. All right. Well, of course, want to get to Edoxia as quick as we can. But what was a Serve Now story? We'll just do it since Edoxia is going to share a whole bunch of stories from the Middle East. But us three, real quickly, will share what Serve Now story caught your eye this week.
Yeah, I think for me, one story that caught my eye was from one of our skills training centers in South Asia, and just thinking about it differently, because before stepping into missions and really understanding it, I feel like before I would have looked at it like now they have a skill to sustain themselves financially and to provide for their needs. But I feel like also it gives them confidence. And that's something that I think a lot of people need to realize. We're not just equipping people with skills, we're equipping them with emotional intelligence to carry it into their spiritual life, their relationships with their family. And ultimately, I think that's a reflection of Jesus. He wants us to be confident, especially in our faith and just all areas of our life tying together. And I think that's just so powerful and something I took from that story that I think a lot of people need to hear.
Wow. Yeah, that we do so many skill training programs in different parts of the world, but the country that you're referencing, and we are being purposely vague about it, but they're in the center where we do tailoring programs. All around that wall, part of the wall, are pictures of every woman that has graduated from that particular training. So it's a beautiful thing to see how many have gone through this program in this particular country. But when you hear these women talking, like you're saying, is they don't just emphasize the skills that they've learned during the time that they've been going through our programs, but you will hear them, what really comes to the surface is the confidence that they gain, the self-esteem, the sense of dignity, the fact that they can do something meaningful with their lives that matters for them, for their families, for others. And there's such a stark contrast when I take teams there. We'll go to a class that's just starting, and those women can barely look you in the eyes. They're so quiet. They don't talk. There's zero confidence. And they're coming out of very difficult, many cases, traumatic circumstances. But then we go to a class that's graduating, and they can't be stopped or silenced. I mean, they are just on fire. And the level of confidence just after 6 months is a remarkable transformation. And that is something we often miss. It's not just about the skills and the income that they will be able to generate from that. It's about the confidence, the dignity, the self-esteem, the sense of just human value that they gain through skill training programs.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it was actually in that same country that, as I was reading through our reports, this particular story of a man who's got a passion for sharing the gospel just really stood out to me, because it focuses on what Serve Now is all about. This gentleman said that and just for clarity purposes, he lives in a country in which it's illegal to change somebody's life, to change somebody's religion, to evangelize. And yet he says, I'm actively involved in gospel outreach and have been blessed to serve in different regions of my country. By God's grace, I have been able to establish more than 150 churches across the country and share the word of God with approximately 500 to 1,000 people each month. And so that's the kind of person that Serve Now gets to partner with. And then he says this, and this is what the partnership looks like. He says, despite my ministry responsibilities, I continue to faithfully attend the basic series classes because they strengthen and guide me. The teachings have helped me greatly in understanding how clearly to present the message of salvation. They have made my communication of the gospel simpler, focused, and effective. I'm thankful for this training as it continues to support my ministry and deepen my understanding of the word of God. So that's just, to me, that's the heart of what Serve Now is all about, is equipping those believers who already know the language, already know the culture, are already living in that country, and just helping them continue to be equipped and empowered and excited to continue the amazing, courageous work that they do. So I just love that story.
That's awesome. Yeah, the story that caught my eye this week was out of a country, Benin, West Africa. Kendall and I have been to. We've talked about it on some prior podcasts. It's a church that started because of the basic series books. No church in that community, heavy idol worship. But because of the basic series books, this new church has started, and Kendall and I have visited it. We've helped with various projects there. But this week, there were more people being baptized that had come to faith in Jesus in that community. So it just continues to grow, and it's special to keep watching that.
That's so encouraging. And I think it goes back to your point too. We're so filled, culture and media, with so many negative things. But I think that's something I'm just so blessed to be a part of, to know and not have to pay attention to the media. We hear all of these stories firsthand. And I think it's just so powerful and encouraging to keep doing this work and to keep being involved and pushing other people to start to get involved and to want to have a stake in what God is doing too.
And that's really a big part of why we wanted to start this podcast, because we started to have this sense of responsibility in receiving all these stories. Man, we've got to get these stories out. People are only hearing all this negative stuff, and yet God is at work in those very countries that we see on the news, all these terrible things happening. He is at work in some of the most beautifully redemptive ways. And so we have a responsibility to share that. And that was a big reason for this podcast. And that kind of brings right to the Middle East, because that's all over the news right now. And again, people are just seeing some terrible things, but we are seeing some of the most beautiful stories of transformation. I believe this is a historic time in the Middle East, perhaps unprecedented in the ways that God is working and ways that people are being reached. Think of that verse in scripture, several verses that kind of reference this, that those who sit in great darkness will see a great light, that in the darkest places, the light shines the brightest. Mm-hmm. And man, is Jesus revealing himself in the Middle East in unbelievable ways. Mm-hmm. And so we have Edoxia here to share about that. But before we get to all that, first of all, tell us about your name, what your name means. That's unusual for a lot of us. I don't think any of us know another Edoxia. So tell us a little bit about your name, and then also a little bit of your story personally, you and your family.
So Edoxia is an old Greek name, and comes from the word doxology. Mm-hmm. So that's where it comes from, and it could be translated to God's glory, or
Praise God, from whom all blessings flow, is what they sing here in the U.S.
Yeah,
that's our doxology.
That's our doxology. That's true. But I am born and raised in Sweden, with parents from Middle East. So it's both from my mom is from Lebanon and my dad is from Egypt.
You're all over the place here.
We have all
Sweden, Lebanon, Egypt, Greek name,
exactly.
What is going on?
That's true. I get confused when they see me and I say I'm from Sweden. Well, you're not blonde and you don't have blue eyes. That's true.
Yeah, I think Emily looks more Swedish than you.
I'd say that. Well, a little bit of background. I would say that my mom, she left Lebanon when she was only 10 years old, and she left the war 78. And at that time, you were like in the midst of the war, and you were seeing everything, like dead people on the streets and all that stuff. That was really their everyday life. And at that time, my grandmother just I thought I should take my kids and go from here and save them, And they had a smuggler they paid money to, and their thoughts were that they were going to France, to Paris. That's what they paid for. But they're ending up coming to Sweden. They didn't even know that they were in Sweden. Nobody told them that they will be ending up in Sweden.
Wow.
They were just surprised to be there. And I believe that was actually God's calling and God's plan for them to come there. What happened at that time, Sweden were not that equipped or knowing what they want to do with all the people that comes in as it is today. They know exactly how to help out the refugees and all that stuff. And at that time, you had to hide. You had to hide in somewhere, because if they catch you, or if they just take you back in the plane back to that war zone again. At that time, my mom, she heard that if you got married and have children, you might get, you could stay here in Sweden. And that's what she did. She married a man, and she got me, she was pregnant, and she got me she was only 15 years old. She was a kid.
When she had you.
When she had me.
So she was married
at 14 or 13.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's actually illegal. So the one who married her in the church were doing illegal stuff also. So, and she had me at 15. And unfortunately, she married a man who wasn't that good. He was a very abusive man, and like extremely abusive. And that was my upbringing, me and my sister and my mom, in an environment that was unhealthy for anyone to live in. And as I didn't mention at the beginning, that my mom, and she comes from a Orthodox Christian background, like Syrian or Aramaic Orthodox background. And that means also, I don't want to say that they don't have a personal relationship, but in our family, they didn't. They just were, culturally Christian at that time.
Which I think would be fair to say in general, that many that would identify as Orthodox, and it is unfair to others who are very strong, passionate in their faith, but many who would identify, at least in that part of the world, as Orthodox, it's more of a cultural,
That's true.
born into a Christian family, but doesn't necessarily mean that there's,
having a personal relationship to God. Like, for an example, in my mom's family, they never read the Bible or like singing worship songs or praying necessarily. They have just the Father's Prayer in the end, and that's what they do before you sleep. But that was it. They don't go to church and all that stuff. However, my mom divorced that man, and thank God she met a wonderful man after that, and that's my dad that I call dad today. So he is the Egyptian one, and
actually you more call him Baba.
Baba.
We always hear her talking on the phone. Baba. Baba, no.
That's true. I have to put the boundaries, because he can just do whatever, and we have to say, hey, you cannot do that. It's enough. So when they got married, he actually introduced God in a right way into our family, and that was shown in a very, very big, a picture. Like, my mom came to faith, and her life totally changed. And it wasn't just my mom, like her sisters and brother, and then my grandmother and grandfather. It was really a door opening into our family. A lot of people got saved. Yeah, I think that's a background. I have 3 sisters, younger sisters, and that's great.
Just hearing you share that part of your story, it's so true with so many of our leaders, that they have this personal story themselves that I think, because in many cases, because of what they themselves have been through, they have such a heart of compassion for
That's
others. And it's just awful, the dynamic of the past, but beautiful, and how, just like the promise of God says, that he is able and he will work all things together for good. Not that everything that happens to us is good, but he's able to work it all together for good. Anyway,
I agree with that, because people would ask me, like, I remember when I had youth meetings and stuff at church, they would ask me about Edoxia, how can you say God is good when you have been going through that life? And I mean, there is a lot of people who can relate to that kind of life. And how can you say that God is good? And how could that even be a plan, like from God in your life? And I don't say that God really enjoying to see his kids to, suffer in a way. But as you said, I really feel that God is in a way preparing our hearts to understand and can serve other people who go through the same things. And of course you have to go through healing and all that stuff. But I believe that. I believe God is really changing and doing something good of bad things and dark areas in our lives. Yeah.
And I think too, during those times, he gives us confidence to know that we can look to him in other situations that we might face in the future, and just know that he will continue to work in the midst of any circumstance. So I think going through those bad things, it does stink and it's not fun, but God helps us to know and have confidence and be affirmed, and we can make it through. He gives us the strength, and good things are coming.
Yeah, and that I think leads into really the second question for you, which is that's on a very deeply personal level, and yet we see things on the news on this, big level, but that big level is impacting people's lives at a very personal level all across the Middle East. So can you kind of help give us a little context what is happening right now, and then what is God doing in the middle of that we're not hearing on the news?
Yeah, I mean it's a really mess time and messed up place in that era right now, and everyone can see that and hear that. What I want to highlight is that these are human beings, and they live in a place. It's loaded with war and darkness and so much pressure from both religion leaders and political, views and all that stuff. And we know that there is several groups. You have the very religious people, fanatics, and then you also have the people who are just normal people. They just want to live life like normals, even if they call themselves, for an example, Muslims, but they're very like liberal or very open, and they barely read the Quran. I would say that they are the majority of the people we're talking about, and they they just want to have a normal life, and that is the hard part to understand when you see all the darkness in this area. But I also believe that God is actually doing something in this place, and he is, I would say that I feel like he is actually exposing the truth in a way, and he is also setting people free. I mean, we see what's going on in many areas, like for an example in Iran. It's actually a very, very dark place where you don't have any freedom. You don't have a freedom to questioning or to think in a way if it's not according to their own like system or their own books. And if you do, they just feel like they have the authority to demand your life in a way. They have the authority to just you know totally kill you or have you in prison. But I believe in midst of that darkness, God is really doing something. People are really thirsty and hungry about the truth. And that also questions the people who just dare to be reasonable, just to, think. So why are they so afraid of me to just think or ask or do the research? And that is where God is really coming in, when people start to dare to question, and you see that God is really touching hearts. And I usually say also, in many times where we're talking about these subjects, that I'd say the Muslim people are the people who sees Christ most. Like when I ask people that I know, like Christian people, have you ever seen Jesus in like a vision or a dream or something? That's barely like that could be, but it's not that much. But as Muslims, I mean, there are so many people who really seeing Jesus and hearing him. And I mean, you have to be very desperate to the truth, or, where are you, God? And then the only living God is showing himself, because there is no other God.
That's actually one of my favorite quotes from you. We've spent almost a week together, various meetings, and I've heard you say it twice now.
Yeah.
that one of the best things we can say if we end up having any interaction with a Muslim is say, cry out to God to reveal himself to
Yes.
you. And there's only one living God who
Who can-
has the ability to reveal himself
Exactly.
to us. And so I think that's one of my takeaways from our time together
Yeah.
over the last week. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
I think you said a number of really important things there. One is that we could spend a whole episode talking about Islam
Yeah.
and just the dynamics of that, because it's more than just a religion. It's a whole way of life. It's political, it's cultural, it's religion, it's got it all. So it's not just a religion, it's
No.
literally. So anyway,
Yeah.
we could spend a whole episode just diving into that, but I loved how you humanized the people that in many cases, and I would say the majority, are trapped in a system that is one of fear-based and bondage. But they're human beings made in the image of God, loved by God, and if they seek him, no matter, this is true for anybody in any part of the world, if we seek him with all of our heart, he will reveal himself to us. And like you said, God is revealing himself, and particularly in the Muslim world, we do see more vision and dream type testimonies. Part of that is because that has the highest level of authority for a Muslim. Whereas like in Asia, we see a lot more physical healings. Whereas here, sometimes we may not see those level of activities, but we're more intellectual based. What I believe is that God just works in different ways in different people's lives, and he knows best how to speak the language that will have the most impact on our lives for those that are seeking him. And so many cases, Muslims that are seeing Jesus in a vision or dream, they don't even know it's him.
Yeah.
But it begins to put them on this pursuit of, well, that has to be real. Who is this man? And we have so many stories, even from your dad and you sharing with us, even in Sweden and not just the Middle East, but other parts of the world, of testimonies like that.
Yeah. It's amazing.
But I think it's just so important to highlight, the fact that we're talking about human beings.
Yeah. And I always say that the extremists are the loudest. Okay. And we think they are like the majority. But I also want to just point of this is maybe very extreme, but just for you to understand the picture, I always say Hitler was just one person and he could damage so many, right? And he could kill so many. He was just one person. And sometimes it's not about, we have to be aware that even if they are a minority, they can do so much damage. And that's the thing that we live in the west part of the world, and we have to be awake, and we have to be alert, and we have to educate ourselves to understand the mindset and all that things. It's very important. I'd say that. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit. Let's get into this at this point of the podcast. What is Serve Now doing? What are we doing together in the Middle East? And how are we reaching people in that part of the world?
I mean, we're so grateful that we're doing this together. And we've been doing it for a couple of years now. And we're doing a lot of things in many countries in Middle East. It's actually basically, I would say it's on two big pillars that we do the humanitarian part, where we actually reach with all kinds of things that we need to show love and care and compassion to people. So it's the humanitarian part of it. And then it's also
Let me actually stop you right there.
Okay.
Why is that part of it so important, particularly in the Middle East?
I mean, so it's loving on people. He were not asking them what their belief is or what they, if they look like him or not. He was just loving people, and he were meeting them where they were. And I believe that we have to be that mirror. We have to show, the gospel is all about showing love to others and seeing the whole person of those people we are serving, reaching out not only by, seeing Bible verses and preaching on them, but really be there on the ground and meeting their needs and showing them real love, and not being there only for projects, doing something and then you say, hi, we did this, and we take some pictures and then we go out. Instead of doing something consistently, showing them love, we're staying there. We are here with you, and doing this together with you. We want to do something that's long term, and that will actually open hearts because on that part of the world, it's very hard for them to trust again because they've been so disappointed so many times from people, their own people, like people that are sharing the same culture, same belief, and from the society or anything like that. They're been so disappointed so many times. And I believe coming in and actually being that light and that salt as Jesus is talking, that would do a big difference. And we see that.
And we hear so many statements out of the Middle East in particular where, this is a very powerful statement. Many will say only Christians help us.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. We always hear that. And they asking us many times have they said, people who share our own belief, they don't even care. And that is a big thing. We have to stick to do what Jesus did. And that's what we do.
And that's a key point right there
Yeah.
too, is that particularly in Islam, there is no concept of God is love,
Yeah.
which is so fundamental and foundational for us,
Yeah.
right? For God so loved the world that he gave. He didn't just preach, by the way. He gave, he
Yeah.
sacrificed. I mean, he showed it, demonstrated it. So when there is that encounter of people who care, there's also questions of why are you doing this? We're not even the same faith, and why do you care about us? And that love is radically transformational. In fact, your dad has written one of our basic series books, and we specifically asked him to write this particular one, knowing the importance of this in the Middle East, the basic things you need to know about God's love for you.
That's actually something totally new for them. They've never heard that before, even if you're like reading the Quran and all that stuff. He's not mentioned as a loving God. Like they don't know that concept. How can God love? Because love is more something that we here as a human can express in a way. So they don't get that. They don't understand how we can have a loving God who sacrificed himself for us. And so it's really, really special. But what I want to also say about what we were sharing, that will also open so many doors when they asking those questions to us. Why do you do that? And when you talk about genuine love, but they say, but my uncle loved me too, but he doesn't show it in this way, for an example. And this is an opportunity to us to just minister to them, to really spread the gospel in a real way. Like we do this because we've been taught, because God loves me, so I just want to show you how he loves me and share it with you so you also can be a part of it and have that part from God.
Yeah, and of course, our mission is to show Christ's passion, his love, right, for the world by serving the most vulnerable, really stepping in those places where there's greatest need and there's just gaps, there's nothing happening. In fact, that's a big reason why some of the projects we have going right now in the Middle East have started. And I'll just name two of them, and you can share with us a little bit more about these projects that are doing exactly this, demonstrating God's love in action, week in and week out, day in and day out. But one of them is, and we're not going to say the name of this particular people group, but they live in refugee camps. And I remember years ago when your dad was visiting this community, and he was communicating back to me, and it was a statement that he made that just broke my heart and is the reason why we're now doing projects in this community. Because when I heard him say that these people were communicating, we feel forgotten and abandoned by the world.
Yeah.
And this was a group that had been just utterly brutalized and terrorized by ISIS. You can share a little bit more about that years ago. And at that time, a lot of organizations had come in, a lot of big organizations came in and they did their initial emergency relief and started various things. But years have gone by and they have pulled out. And so there's a sense of feeling abandoned. And when I heard that, I remember the first thing that rose up was the sense of we have to do something to show them that there is a God that has not abandoned them and loves them. So that's one group of people. Now in another refugee camp, it was this opportunity of there's no other health clinic for a refugee community of 50,000 people.
Yeah.
And there again, it was like, we have to do something.
Yeah.
And so we did open, and Kendall and I were there for the ceremony, Edoxia too, and her dad, of course. But we were there for the opening ceremony of that health clinic that's operating in this refugee camp. So maybe share with us a little bit about those specific concrete projects and the difference that they're making.
It's amazing what you're saying, Ben, because that's exactly what happened at that time. There were so many people there helping in the beginning, but then they just disappeared and they felt abandoned. And we just feel like God's grace in this, that he really felt, we just felt that God's heart, stay here and do this with them. Let them see me, like God telling us, let them see me, who I am. And we just felt like, yes, we have to do something. And we started a center, like day center for educational center for kids.
And this is a 5-story building that we started at various activities.
In just outside one of these refugee camp. And in every refugee camp, you have around around 15,000 up to 20,000, 50,000 people in each. So it's a huge number of people who are displaced and the funny thing is, not the funny, but the thing is that they've been there for over like 10 years. And people thought, okay, this is just a temporary place for us to be until, they fix our houses or whatever. And then we go back to our normal life. They've been there for 10 years. I mean, there are kids who are born there and they have nowhere to go back. So we just feel like we do what God is calling us to do. We had that educational center for kids and for women. Women could go there and have trauma therapy. And in this educational center, we're not doing just normal school education. It's also music and art, and for people who really can process whatever they've been through during those hard times. So it's amazing.
Tell us, there's a story, and I could tell the story too because I was there for this, but I'd like you to share it. There is one girl in particular at this center. We took the kids outside of this place to like a oasis area where there was water and activities that we were doing with them. But one of these girls, and I think she was only about 15 years old at the time, she left the other kids. They were all playing together, and she came over to where we were sitting, the adults, pulled up a chair and started asking the deepest questions I've ever heard a girl of her age ask. And we began to hear a bit more of her story. But tell us about her story, because this is just unbelievable and will capture exactly what God's doing in the Middle East.
Yeah, exactly. So this girl, she was at the age what happened with her and her mother. She was very young. They were captive, and they sold her mother to a soldier. And that soldier, he lives in Syria and was fighting in Syria. So he took the woman, like her mother, and she could follow because she was young. And they were like entering houses, and they had to move from house to house because I know there was American troops there trying to stop all the ISIS activity, and they had to flee from places so and so. And this girl was actually saying that at one point they entered a house, like there's a lot of abandoned houses because all the Christian and all the minorities had to flee the areas of these places. So she said at one point of one of these houses they entered, there was a lot of books, a lot of literature, a lot of Bibles. And she took a Bible and she started to read this Bible. And of course, she was trying to do that when he was not at home at that time, where he's going out and fighting and so. And
I mean, this is in the middle of terrorist captivity.
I mean, it's in the darkest story. Like her mom is a slave, and she also in that matter. But in the midst of this, she finds this Bible and she starts to read it. And she comes across about this man, Jesus. And she was like, my God, he doesn't look like anyone else I know, any other man I've ever had in my life. And she felt in love with him. And she kept read that Bible, and she could actually hide it because she was going from house to house, right? And she could actually hide it, and she had it with her all the time. And they came back to Iraq at this time. And many years later, they got free. And she said to my dad and Ben, he was sitting there, and she said, I love him. And, at all that time, when she was going through that dark time, she said, I felt he was my friend. He was my only friend I could talk to when stuff was happening with her mother or with her. She said, he was the only one I could talk to. I felt like he was there. And when we met her at that place, she said, how how can I know that he loves me? How can I know I'm his? Can I be like you? Because she knew we are Christians. And I said, honey, you already saved. He loves you. And, he already showed himself for you when you said, like, I felt like he was with me all the time. And that's a just amazing story to hear that.
I mean, that's nobody
Yeah.
teaching her, no pastor, no one explaining anything, just this young girl reading the Bible and somehow knowing there's something different about this Jesus guy. Unbelievable.
Yeah. It's amazing.
And we hear story after story like that. Worse circumstances, and yet there's Jesus.
Yeah.
Wow. I don't even know how to transition that. You could just sit in that forever. So many of the countries we're talking about are very difficult, very dangerous. People like you and some others try to prevent me and your dad from going certain places. We have pushed the boundaries in some places we've gone, but there are some places they won't let us go. And that's part of Edoxia's job, by the way, is to
keep you safe.
Keep us,
on track.
Her dad and I are so similar, and we're just always restless and always trying to go places.
Crazy people.
Yeah, we're like bugs drawn to a light and wanting to go places where everybody else wants to go away from. But it is true. There are many countries, there are many places we can't maybe physically go into. So tell us, how are some other ways we're reaching people in that part of the world? Because you and your dad started a program that is reaching millions of people every month in the Muslim Arabic part of the world. So tell us about this program.
Yeah. So it's the road to paradise. As we know, like in normal terms, as Christians, we send missionaries all over the world, and and that's still very good because you get very personal. But also, we're praying that God gives us ideas to really reach out, and this is one of those ideas. That how can we reach the Muslim community in a way that's very effective without being disrespectful, and just focusing on God and Jesus in every message. So what we did was that it's a very short program that focused on very Muslim or Islamic subjects. We're actually basically using their own language and their own words. And the program is all about letting them come into this program. So it's the way to paradise because everything they do is to reach that paradise, right? And the subject would be anything that's really concerning them. Like, for example, so we can reach the paradise by praying 5 times a day or fasting Ramadan or, visiting the places like holy places and stuff like that. And what we do is that people comes in because they really genuinely think it's a Muslim program. And it really sounds like a Muslim program until you reach the middle of the program, and then it's switched. And that's when they get, okay. And it's all about making them think. It's all about like, let them think about new ways, or if can this really be the truth, or is there another truth? And I mean, we have been reached so many, and what's amazing about this that we just don't do that and stop over there. We have a full team, a follow-up team that works behind the scenes, let's say. So when you see this program, you can comment on it, and then you will have someone that replies, and then also do the whole follow-up in this. And it's in Arabic. We have the subtitle to English and to Indonesian. We have teams over the Arabic countries and also a team in Indonesia. And they just follow up with those people who are questioning the things. And some people goes private because they can't just keep on asking questions like publicly. That could be very dangerous for them. But do you have any, like, if they have interest, they will go private, and then there they will meet people who will follow them up. And that process is actually a little bit long because of safety. We have a lot of spies, and it could be a lot of people who doesn't really, are there for right attention. So they will follow with them until you feel like this person is really seeking the truth. And so, yeah.
Do you have a story?
I have a story.
Similar statement, or statements we hear from people watching?
Yeah. I mean, I could say about one guy, he actually says what really were so interesting for me is that you never we never criticize Islam or Quran or even have any like discussion around their belief, because that is not interested for us. There is so many people who does that, and when they listen to something like that, you lost them because they
Meaning just attacking.
attacking. So that's not the style of this program. It's really not focusing on that, because I always say they already know that. They know their Quran. They know how their prophet is. Although they can be good to have those kinds of discussions, that's good. But in this case, we just want them to focus on to come into the program and then listen enough to that point that they will understand that, okay, this is something else. Okay, I can try to figure it out in another way. Yeah.
Kendall, I think when we were in a country together, there was someone we met with. I've heard you share the story before of one of the guys that helps to follow up people. And I know there was a particular story he told that touched your heart. Do you want to share that one?
Yeah, well, I mean, first and foremost, this gentleman just amazed me in his courage. Similar to the story I shared earlier about a different country, this gentleman just was willing to go wherever throughout the country to meet with people, to follow up with people. And one of them was a military leader. He like showed me the picture, talked about being able to baptize him. There's another gentleman
Which that was a high-ranking government official in a closed country that he went and baptized because of him watching this program.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Well, and I asked him, I said, how did you know that this was going to be somebody trustworthy or whatever? And he said, well, I mean, I didn't know for sure, but over time, he said, you start getting an idea of, and as Edoxia was saying, it's a process of taking the time with people to keep interacting with them and finding out, are they really interested in knowing the answer, or do they just, are they just trying to trick me or whatever? But he takes risks. I mean, he talked one time about baptizing somebody where he drove, I think it was 3 to 4 hours to go baptize somebody, and then 3 to 4 hours to come back because he knew he didn't want to stay there.
Yeah, same place.
So yeah, just the courage of brothers and sisters in Christ who live in these countries.
Yeah, these aren't American missionaries we're talking about.
Nope.
Yeah.
Nope. These are folks that are living in these countries with that kind of courage, that kind of strategy, that kind of willingness to enter into real relationship with folks. His dream, I mean, those who are listening, pray for this gentleman who, if I recall correctly, he said he led over 300 people to Christ, or baptized over 300 people, I think it was, throughout the country. And his dream is to try and figure out how to somehow get these folks together so they can be an encouragement to one another, even if it's just a couple times a year. Yeah, just be praying for these brothers and sisters who are acting with such courage and following up. I just love that you guys have a team, that this isn't just about getting a lot of views and getting a lot of clicks.
15 million viewers.
Month. 15 million viewers a month.
Yeah.
And this is, pushed out social media, Facebook, YouTube, but I think it was 6 million a month up until just recently. I think it's been now doing it on TikTok that has really more than doubled the reach of this program. I mean, that's remarkable.
So many people were shocked last night when we did the trivia at the banquet, and they were saying 1 million, and they just couldn't believe it was 15 million.
Yeah.
So I think that speaks volumes.
That people are hungry,
Yeah.
searching for truth in that part of the world.
Yeah.
Emily, what are you hearing in this, especially for those watching or listening as you're hearing these things? Kendall and I have traveled to these places where, we've been in the middle of it. Edoxia, of course, in the middle of it. What do you hear, especially for those listening?
Yeah, I think for people here in the States, this is such a good example of bold faith lived out. And I think that's something that we kind of lose here, because we don't like to be uncomfortable. We don't like to step in the boldness of what it might mean to share our faith or bring someone to Christ or minister to somebody in need. And I think that's something that we need to be thinking about. And just hearing these stories, continue to hunger for stories like this and pray for ways where we can display that bold faith here and just encourage other people to step into it. I think that's something that I'm getting from it, just that bold faith.
Awesome. That's really good.
Well, Edoxia, the basic series are also wildly popular across the Middle East. Like, I mean, just spreading like wildfire, which is, I seem to say that about every part of the world. But I mean, overwhelmingly, I guess, surprised or just excited. I mean, Middle East is such a historic part of the world, biblical, stuff. It's like going back to where all this started. And I'm talking about in Israel, I'm talking about other countries where a lot of people don't think about this, but neighboring countries have a ton of biblical history beyond Israel.
Yeah.
And so to see God at work now, today, and we get to be a part of these places where Jesus once walked, or all these characters we read about in scripture, and to see him alive and well in that part of the world is just super exciting. But why are the basic series books so popular in across the Middle East?
Yeah. So in the Christian communities, for an example, I'll take Egypt as an example. So we have the Coptic Christians and we have the evangelical Christians and so on. But those parts of Egypt where we're working with, there are a lot of Christians that just, doesn't have a personal relationship to God. They attend the church, but they're very cultural Christians. And I remember like just asking very like simple questions about God. And so even if they attend the churches, they just don't have that knowledge. And we just felt like this is a huge, like we have to do something. And that's where the TBT books really steps in and doing a great job. It's not only having them in the like core subjects in the Bible, but it's also about strengthening the communities coming together. Like we know some of the strongest groups are the women group in those areas, where they go together. And at some point they're just so loving this, because it's not just as I said, something that they learn, but that's something they do together. They go together, they pray together, they care about each other. They haven't had that before. It's like before they would just attend the church and they go and, but now they're doing something together. It's something really growing there.
That's something I've noticed as I've traveled around and we've met with groups that are using the basic series books, is they are not just books. They are not just resources. They are not just references. They're not even like we often talk about them as discipleship tools or evangelistic, resources, or Bible study, Bible engagement tools. They are creating community, creating life together. Like they're doing life together. They're being the church because of these books. That's what they're facilitating.
Yeah. And also life changing. Like they're all sharing what's like their testimonies from having these days when they're studying together. So it's not only, as you said, educational, but it's really changing their life and the life experience. And as a Christian, it's not anymore just something traditional. It's really personal. Like this is what we see among them. It's really, really. And also a very interesting part is like they're actually coming with pressure for the leaders, because now the leaders is like, oh, what's going on with all these ladies who's coming into the church and start to, hey, we cannot just be sitting and do nothing. Let's pray, let's fast. And they're totally shocked that there's a big change in these ladies' life. Yeah.
Wow.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, in light of the war, we are coming up towards the end of our time, but in light of the current war, although that part of the world, there's almost always conflict or turbulence of some kind, and it comes and it goes. But we are right now trying to send more 40-foot containers. We do this in Ukraine. We do this in other parts of the world as well. And sometimes regardless of what's happening, but in light of the war right now, we're trying to send a container of specialized medical equipment, wheelchairs, hospital beds, clothes to Lebanon, where a lot of people probably don't know this, but it's not just this, direct war between Iran and Israel. It's impacting surrounding countries. Like Israel's bombing Lebanon, and there are over 2 million people displaced in Lebanon right now as Israel's trying to go after terrorist organizations. But there's also bombings in Iraq, close by where we have some of our projects. So this is impacting, real people's lives in so many different ways. And a lot of this is very complex and has different dynamics to it. But we're trying to get a container to Lebanon and another one to Iraq, even for our health clinic and other needs that are around. But tell us, and we also work with special needs people in multiple countries, including, well, yeah, several countries, different projects, a lot of special need people and children. Anything you want to tell us about that?
I mean, again, we just feel like we want to love on people, and doesn't matter what you are. And we just feel like God's grace giving us the opportunity to even reach out to the most, needy, or you say, yeah, people who really needs that help. And so we are actually helping several places, but we could talk about the one in Egypt. It's a school with, I could actually just say a story about that because it's really interesting. So we have a school with disabled children, and it's all of kind of this special needs. And a story from that is that you met him, Ben, before, and it's a guy. He is maybe 15 or something, and he's been in another school for many years. And in this school that we work with, there are Christian teachers, but the kids are mixed. So they have Muslims and they have Christian and so. And one day, a mom to this boy came, and they didn't know if she was happy or angry at that point, but she was screaming, and she was so happy because she've never heard him talk. So he has he cannot talk, this boy, but at some point at home she heard him saying Yeshua, and Yeshua in Arabic means Jesus. And she said, what? And, she's a Muslim. And the first reaction would be from the teachers, oh no, what happened now? Is that going to be a problem for us? And she said, I don't care. I'm just so happy that my son could even speak. And if he chose to say Yeshua, I'm happy for that. And I mean, that is such encouraging for us to just keep on doing what we're doing. And then even if it's not they don't really teach about like religious stuff, but he just picked up that from somewhere.
That's beautiful.
That's cool.
Really is beautiful. Yeah, I'll maybe start to wrap this up with a story from our health center when Kendall and I were there for the opening ceremony. I remember we were interviewing a patient, and the doctor that we have there who is just doing a wonderful job, and not just on the professional level, but man, her heart of compassion for people. Like, she will take time to pray for patients. She will counsel them. It goes beyond the medical care there. But I was interviewing both of them, and this patient, she was sharing a little bit about her situation and the care that she received there. And in the middle of it, she just stopped. She started to cry, and she turned and just wrapped her arms around our doctor there. And I actually captured this. I have a picture of this very moment. But as she was hugging her, she said, I think God sent you here to help us.
Yes.
And again, I just keep coming back to these tangible expressions of love are so much more powerful than we're aware of, and give opportunity for us to share the good news with people. Even that same day, Kendall, were you in the room for this? I wasn't, but I mean, Edoxia, you were. I know you were, because there was a patient that you were counseling along with a couple others, and you ended up leading her to faith in Jesus right there in that room.
Yeah.
Maybe either of you could share that.
Well, I heard about it later. I was, me, I can ask 100 questions. So I was kind of unpacking it with Edoxia and the others who were in that room, I think in the car on the way back.
Okay.
So yeah, go ahead. You tell the story because you were there.
Yeah, that was very special time, because that was not something that we usually do in a place like that, because just for the security and that stuff. But we just, I always say you're just gonna be led by the Spirit and trusting Him doing whatever He's doing. Sometimes we have our rules, but then God has His own rules. And I'd say at that time, I mean, this lady, she was so ready. She had been going through so much hardship in her life, very abusive husband, and that husband was not only abusing her, but also her daughters, or their daughters in this case. And they are just like, she was so fed up with this. She was so tired of, living that life, but also at the same time very confused. What can I do next? I mean, this is what I am. And in her mind, she cannot seek something else because that's so sinful in their religion. But when we were talking, I just said, hey, very, very simple. We had a long discussion. Okay, I'm not going to go in all the details, but just highlight that the fact that she said, I don't know what to do, and this is my life, and God put me here. This is what it's going to be. And I said, you know what? That's not the truth. And I said, if you had to choose to follow a dead man or follow should I continue? Yeah. To follow a dead man or to follow a man who is alive, who would you follow? She said, the living one. I said that we have one. Jesus is alive and Muhammad is dead. He has a grave and you can go visit that. He's not alive. But then you have a living God who is there and he's waiting for you and he would love you to come to him. And she was asking, can he accept me even if I have another religion? I said, of course. It's your choice. You didn't choose to be anything, but you can choose to follow the person that you want to. And she accepted the Lord at that day and we prayed together and she was crying and she was so joyful and
Yeah, the
that's
smile
amazing.
she had on
Yeah.
her face, it was precious. I saw it afterwards. Just the joy. You
Yeah.
could see it emanating out of her.
That's a beautiful story. I think we might have lost Emily there in the middle of that.
I don't even know. You can still hear me. I don't know if it's going to come through, but
Okay.
I'm trying to figure out if I can turn the camera back on.
Gotcha. Yeah. But Edoxia, thank you for sharing that and everything that you shared. Thank you even more so for your work, your heart for people, your love for the Lord, and just everything you do as we partner together in the Middle East. It really is a joy and privilege to be working with you guys and to see the growth that we've had in the Middle East just over these last, I guess we've been working with you. I think it already has been at least 7 years.
Yeah, I would say that at least 7 years. Yeah.
Yeah, if not longer.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know it was pre-COVID since that's the way we mark time. But yeah, very, very special to be a part of all of that. So thank you for being here. Thank you for everything you do. Any closing comments from you guys for those watching or listening that maybe you hope people could take away from this?
I think for me, if you can still hear me,
At least the voice from the void, if you can't see her.
is just be encouraged by these stories. Take them, engage with Serve Now, read more stories, just get connected and pray for discernment about how you can in your life exemplify that bold faith and that courageous standpoint of wanting to minister to others, no matter what that looks like. Of course, we may not be risking our lives here, but it's a reality for a lot of people. So if they're doing it, we can risk things in our own lives to take that step in obedience to the Lord. And I think that's just something we need to carry with us moving forward.
Yeah, that's really good. I can just springboard off of that and just say, if you're ever, watching the news or hearing about different things happening in the Middle East or around the world, and you're just thinking, what can I do? I mean, is there really anything I can do? And the beautiful thing about Serve Now, and the reason I was a supporter of Serve Now before I ever worked with Serve Now, was because I realized that Serve Now has people on the ground like Edoxia, folks that are in these countries, Christians who are so bold and so courageous, working tirelessly in so many different ways. And we can do something. Even if it feels like just a little bit, we can do something. So if you're not sure what you can do, please reach out to us. There's ways you can contact us through the ServeNow website, weservenow.org. Just reach out to us and we'd love to partner with you in finding ways that you can be a blessing to folks in the Middle East and around the world.
Yeah, there's nothing else I can add to that other than to thank you all for watching and listening, and just want to encourage you to continue to follow along with these episodes. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed. Share this with some other people. We want to get the word out to more people. Good news that is still alive and well all over the world. But thank you, and we'll see you next time.